Hi YouTubers, this is Fox speaking. This is most probably my first video about anything, and I'd like to use this very first video to discuss things about computer restoration. Now, as you may know, this is a Commodore 64, and works perfectly, and I got the 1541 drive, 1541 Mark II floppy disk drive that could need somewhat of clean out. I've used these on and off for almost 5-6 years, if not longer, but I never quite took the basic precautions in computer restoration. What I do today is usually, before I hook it up at all, I open it up to check on capacitors and the other components in there, to see if they're still good, thus kind of reducing the chance of anything blowing up in my face, or the damage spreading from a blown component and stuff like that. So first off, the Commodore 64, I'll show you the innards of it, then we'll move on to the 1541 drive. So here the Commodore 64 has been opened up. As you can see, it's you have the bottom of the keyboard, looks a bit shabby with just sellotape over there, but nevertheless, and strangely enough, works quite perfectly. I have somewhat of a theory that someone else might have been in here before me, before I got it. You have the keyboard connector, which hooks directly into this row of pins, and over here you have the connector for the little red light up there, to see whether it's on or not. Now, there's one thing really to notice, and that is this cardboard. I think it's covered with some kind of aluminum or something, to keep out all kinds of RF interference. On first sight, yeah, this cover is yeah, dusty, very much so. Should probably get that off. And for some reason it's been bolted or riveted onto the memory expansion port, for reasons unknown to me, really. I would say someone was pretty stupid in doing this, but a little bit about the hardware. First off, this was built in 1984, as far as I could tell from the serial number. And it's built in West Germany, well, has that serial number. There's a list somewhere on the internet where you can actually add your Commodore 64 to the list with its traits and whatever kinds of stuff you may have done with it over the years, whether it be processor upgrades or where it's located, and you can add that serial number and a few of the other traits, like the color of the keys and the logo up here, because there's 3 or 4 different styles, really. Like first model had the F function keys made in orange, and this logo has a few different revisions. And also you could get a blue Commodore 64, which was well, in the same breadbox format, but it was known as the Aldi Commodore because they were distributed by Aldi. But let's take a look under the cardboard. And first off we have the MOS technology 6502 CPU. It looks quite small. I think it's a 24-pin package or something. Oh, actually, I think it's a 40-pin package. It just looks so small. So you have the keyboard connector, the CPU, 6526. I think that's kind of clock or memory controller thing. As you can see, well, these parts are copyrighted in 1982 by the Commodore Business Machines Corporation, CBM. Sorry if my camera doesn't focus quite right. We have a 6510, but really it doesn't look that dusty at all. It just needs a few Q-tips and some lung power. As you can see, some of the work down here, it looks like some of the resistors have been bypassed by diodes. I don't really know what the hell is up with that, but I guess it's some kind of company mistake at the factory, or some later modification to the machine. And I really don't want to destroy this cardboard too much, because as you can see, it was quite good at maintaining the components as they were, but we could at least still check on a few capacitors. From what we can see now, the main problem with computers this old, with the exception of a few computers around the 2000s to around 2005, were or are bulging capacitors. Capacitors, when they start to get old, or the electrolyte starts to chemically react with the metal and stuff like that, they start to, at first they start to bulge on the top. Now, looking at a few of these capacitors, they're completely flat on top. There's no sign of leakage or anything like that. So these capacitors are holding up quite well, despite the computer being nearly 30 years old. So there's nothing really much to be done about this, except give it a bit of a clean up, drying off some of the dust and stuff like that. But whenever capacitors start to whenever you see bulging capacitors or leaking capacitors, you really need to change them, because they can wreak havoc on the components, especially because the electrolyte fluid inside is quite corrosive to its surroundings, and it will start to eat away at your motherboard, essentially making the machine a throw-out piece if you don't know how to solder. But it's a relatively easy fix if you know how to handle a soldering iron. What you basically need to do is to get an identical capacitor and then solder the old one off and put a new one in, and then you're basically going again, and the machine will function fine after that. But since there's nothing intrinsically wrong with this, it works perfectly, by the way, and I still do some programming on it, and should this machine go to hell at some time, or rather go to heaven, it's been a great machine, you can still strip like stuff like the CPU. It's, as you can see, it's in one of those cradles, so you can just take out the CPU and use it to, well, anything really, to build your own computer. 6502s are pretty resilient, and they're not the easiest to work with, but easy enough for most people to be able to make a small computer out of them.